Hello, you beautiful humans. We're going to do a bit of a different episode for 100,000 downloads. Just had this little notification come through the other day, and pretty cool. We've been doing this for 6, 7 years, every single week, with the inclusion of Mandy for the last 2, 3 years on the podcast as well. And you guys like it. You guys are downloading it, you're sharing it. We're getting feedback about it all the time. And some of our best clients have come from the podcast because they took the time to really understand our thought process around how we operate, and they decided they loved it and they joined our program. So we're going to do a bit of a different, I guess, behind the curtains discussion around what the program looks like, regardless of whether you join or not. I think you're going to get value from this either way because it really gives you some insight into the methodology and thought process behind why we designed it the way we did. There's many different ways that you can structure a health coaching program, but I think through the many iterations, we're going to go through potentially a couple hundred thousand by this, a couple hundred iterations by this point, Maddie, where the goal has been understanding human behavior, understanding the patterns that people go through, and how do we make sure that we find this balance between getting clients results and making sure they last, right? The last thing I want to do is have someone lose 10 kilos and then put it back on. We're not about doing another diet and another thing where we can just restrict you as much as possible in order to drop the weight in 2 weeks. My goal is to make sure that in 2 years, 20 years, you've still dropped that weight and you're still referring back to what you've learned. So there's some real nuance to this, and this is why I love a podcast format so much, because we can explore that context rather than just plastering a photo on Instagram. So, Mandy, obviously, where I want to kick off here is more that overall design. You've been, a huge part of that development alongside me in the last, nearly 4 years now. Big question, but I want to start with, what do you see being the biggest change in how we have structured the program as a whole, even over the last 4 years?
Big question. Should have preempted this one. I think where we've really changed is, one, we track everything, right? We understand, we're really looking into what works and what doesn't, and getting feedback from our clients and then building that into the program. And probably one of the biggest things that we have changed is just the pure amount of information that we're, teaching stuff. Because when it comes to nutrition and health, there is so much you can dig into all of the time, but all of that information all of the time isn't always helpful to people. And so really kind of looking at, with all of the clients that come through the program and the changes that they make and the results that they get, what were the nuggets of information that were the most important for them to know, and really boiling down how we present our information in our members vault and in our trainings and stuff to be just the key pieces that is going to get people the best results without adding any extra overwhelm, right? Because we're all saturated with information, but it doesn't actually mean anything unless we can put it into action. And I think probably that's been the biggest thing. I don't know if that's probably your biggest takeaway, but even in our trainings and our groups and stuff like that, just bringing it back to actual action and key kind of pieces of information that make the biggest difference for the group of people that we're working with.
Yeah, 100%. The biggest change, I think, in the industry as a whole has been moving from just more information to more context.
Mm.
And, looking at a lot of our videos being an hour plus long inside of the vault to now being the condensed 10 to 15-minute version of, like, this is your need to knows. And then when we get on any
Mm.
sort of group call, it's more around the planning, more around how we break it down to actually fit into your day. And I think, honestly, that's where most people are going to get more value, right? Because if you're listening to these podcasts, you're able to dive into the deeper topics and get an idea of the information. Yet, if you're not doing it or you're finding it hard to fit in regularly, having that discussion, exploring with other people in the room to find out how they're implementing it and how those small tweaks and adjustments can completely change how you look at a problem, that just makes stuff much easier. And I think the feedback loop there as well is so much stronger if people continue to show up to calls because, like, hang on, I'm getting so much more out of this,
Mm.
because I'm not just trying to consume more stuff. And I
Mm.
think that in itself, just paying for speed, paying for simplicity, is really something that I've taken on a lot more and just, I guess, appreciated a lot more. So, and I think it comes from a good place, right? Because both you and I know that there's a certain sort of critical threshold of information that needs to be there in order for you to not get confused by the mountains of crap out there,
Mm.
both in nutrition training space, but really going deeper into lifestyle design, everything else that we talk about. There
Mm.
is a critical threshold to be built. So it's this balance between giving yourself enough time to hit that threshold and then really work through the layers of how that works for you versus not being so overwhelmed with trying to consume everything at the start. And the funny thing about our brain is when we get overwhelmed, we tend to do less stuff and consume more, right? So it just
Yeah.
kind of reinforces that loop a bit.
And it is such a delicate balance, eh? Because I think, well, what I've seen in practice with people that I've worked with is that there's the people that just want to be told what to do, and you tell them what to do, but they don't know why they're doing it. And so after a while, they'll stop. And then it's been a result that they've had for a time that isn't maintainable because they don't know why what they were doing worked. So there is an
Mhm.
amount of information which is really useful for actually understanding I eat enough protein because of it does this, this, and this. But beyond that, there's so much more that just actually isn't helpful. That's just confusing and gets you into the weeds of it, that can send you down all these kind of different rabbit holes, which really don't get you any better result. It's kind of that law of diminishing returns, right? At a certain point, more information doesn't help you more than just doing the thing.
Mm.
And it's kind of, it actually does take a little bit of time to find where that level is. And I think we've had so many people through Body Reset now, so many successes, that we've really been able to kind of find where that line lies a lot more. And it's been a big learning curve for me because obviously I love information. I love to give people everything, but that actually doesn't always help people as much as we think it might.
Yeah, and it was highlighted in our brain health sort of focus of January, right? Where we were really diving into all the nitty gritty around what you can do to improve your brain health. And I think it's really easy, and I think you are super mindful of this, of adding a sort of list of supplements to that list, right? Because it's something that you can easily like, oh, cool, I'm going to take this supplement and improve brain health. But step 1, 2, 3, and 10 have been completely missed in order to add the icing on the cake. You can't add icing if you don't have a cake first. And I was highlighted this, I guess, my assumption of people even inside the program 2 or 3 months in, asking questions around certain new tracking devices or certain supplements. And I need to always bring back, like, are you getting these steps in place first? And the reason I bring
Mm.
this up with you guys is I'm having to learn the lessons so many times over and over again. Hopefully I learn soon. But being able to make sure that, one guy in particular that we were talking about CGMs, right? We were looking at sugar control and managing that, being able to improve his ability to drop body fat without restricting nutrition further, right? Because there's kind of a critical threshold that we want to keep him at. Uh, but I completely missed asking the question, how was your sleep? Right. And it turns
Mm.
out this guy wasn't just a 6 hour a night sleeper. He was like a barely 4.5 hours a night. Right. And it's something that he'd been looking at optimizing nutrition more and more and more, but he wasn't looking at some of those other aspects. Right. And I guess that leans into why we've built Body Reset the way we are, because if we just focused on the nutritional aspect of, say, gut health or recovery, we are missing 80% of the pie. Because if we're not looking at this general stress and design of their day and what sort of work they do and how they enjoy it and what their thoughts are around work and health and challenges and all these things. Uh, and in this case, it was just a classic example, right? We can iterate here, we can bring a supplement in here and there, we can change the timing of certain carbohydrates, but you're sleeping 4 hours a night. Like that's going to have a
Mm.
pretty big impact to uh, what's actually happening with your body and how under recovered things are. So it's this sort of accumulation of, or I guess being very mindful, and we all have it, of being so biased to what we already know and the path that we're always going down. Right, we have 3 pillars, and we're strong in one of them. Right, we're hitting like 90% in one, and then we're 20% and 30% in those other 2 pillars. The logic would say, okay, build 20% up to 30% and 30% up to 40%. But because we are comfortable in the 90%, we go from 90% to 95%, right? And it's just we continue to reinforce what's already strong. It's like continuing to train your biceps because they're the strongest muscle group, but your legs haven't been trained for 2 years, right? It's silly. Yet we
Yeah.
all do it, and it's sometimes it's just a blind spot. It might not be in health, but in some area of your life, it's probably something that comes up. So where I want to
Yeah,
go
we
with this.
typically just continue to do what we're comfortable doing.
100%. Yeah, yeah. So where were we going here? The overall component of how we've designed the program, fundamentally, we both kind of started on this space of moving away from just more information to more context. Now, how we actually install that on a day-to-day level has also changed, right? This balance of how often are we talking to a coach? How are we consuming that information? Is there a collaboration type angle? And how do we make sure that things actually are digested, right? Because again, reducing the amount of information is only helpful if the key components that we then provide are the ones that they implement, right? So let's balance out this, I guess, to invite you into another thought process around the program is that we don't purely rely on one-on-one between you and your coach or between you and Mandy. We focus on finding a bit of a hybrid balance between how you can create those tweaks and refinements with your coach personally around the things that need to be specifically relevant to you. And then there's a group element on top that really has evolved over the last 5, 6 years now, where the way that we've communicated our program is for a very specific type of individual, right? So knowing that they're in a spot with similar challenges or worse, right? If you're, a single mum with 3 kids and we know someone who's got 5 kids and 2 jobs, they've got their own coping strategies. If you run your own business or you're working around certain injury, and we know someone in a similar spot that's working around those things. There's these subcategories of people now with a couple hundred people in our world that there's others that we can lean on in order to really find a better solution for you, right? Even outside of my experiences or Mandy's experiences, we'll have someone else in our community that knows how to crush that obstacle. So I guess where I'm going with this is we've got a certain portion of people, probably the ones that don't listen to our podcast, that sort of see some of our ads online or see a post and join the program, right? And they're like, oh, I thought I'd get a call every 2 days. And I guess we want to explore why we've found that to be unhelpful, right? Because we want to build the best program. It's not about cutting costs and making the cheapest program. That's not our goal. It's to make sure we get you the best results and it's something that you keep long term. And this is really why we've decided to certainly not remove one-on-one. It's still a really, really big part of our program, but not to have a call every 2 days or to only talk to yourself to your coach one-on-one and really have that isolation of problems. And I've kind of gone there a little bit, Mandy, but what's your first thoughts on why that's unhelpful and why we've continued to reinforce the group element?
This one's actually well, I guess this is quite significant for me because I was working just by myself as a practitioner, seeing clients just one-on-one like that. And the reality is I strongly recommend this approach now because I see how much better results you get, not just from working with me, but from working within like a kind of a wraparound approach like we have with a coach who checks in on various things and actually you taking action on the thing, having a specialist who can look at your stuff, having a community and a group involvement there. The results that people get from that are so much better than what they can get from one person because there's so much more perspective, I guess, that is included in all of that. And I think the danger with just having more and more one-on-one calls at a shorter and shorter time frame without any time to actually implement is, again, you're just going back to, well, here's more information to add without actually time to put it in and test it. And that's where the results come in, right? So if you have a one-on-one call with your coach, you work out a plan of action, what you're going to do for the next couple of weeks, then your coach checks in on you. How did this go? How did this go? What are we going to change around? And you can work on that thing and actually get it, progressing well before you come in and add any more. And if you just put more points of contact in there as another coaching call, you don't actually get any more benefit from that. You just get more confusion because you haven't had time to battle test the things that you've actually implemented. So I think it can feel like better value, but it really isn't, because the value is in getting the result, not in just talking to someone about getting the result.
Yeah, it's like having a massage every 2 days, right? It feels really good, but you're not actually giving time to recover and actually adapt from that massage to go again. I think one of the things that there's 2 parts to that I think you've highlighted, Mandy. First part has been we did a coach retreat. We flew all of our coaches from New Zealand, Australia to Wellington, and we had a big 2 days of really connecting on how to make the program better over the year. And it was a great success in a lot of different ways. I'm really excited for how the team's grown even since that retreat. But one of their highlights was very much the same as you, Mandy, which is they've all coached their own clients for a very long time in a one-on-one capacity. And the biggest reason for both joining the program and now how it's shifted how they look at coaching is that they know that the client gets so much more by not just talking to someone individually, but being exposed to that bigger community and ecosystem of really seeing how many more problems are solved, right? And I think there's an isolation of this is only my problem. And like I introduced before, there's other people in a similar spot that probably have gone through that at some degree. And I think it's a really nice way to guide you to not just knowing more stuff, but doing more stuff. The second part that you highlighted there was then that collaborative nature of having other specialists as well. So there's obviously that group aspect, but there's the specialist component that allows us to lean on coaches. And if you're in this space where you feel overwhelmed, or you feel like there's a lot of information out there, try to be an expert in the areas of sleep, gut health, exercise, psychology, and the 10 other things that we talk about all in one space. Like, good luck. That requires a 10-year degree in each direction. So for us, it really became a way to get the best in each field and then get them to collaborate in the middle and talk every week and build every week to make sure that we can really provide that complete service. Because, Mandy's pretty fantastic, but she can't cover everything. And I'm the same as well. So being in a spot where we can lean on those specialists, that really makes a huge difference I feel a lot more confident in providing a complete service through a multidisciplinary team. So that's a really huge part of it.
Mm.
Is there anything to add there?
No, I think that covers it. I think that value of having yeah, like we've intentionally collected quite a bit of a range of coaches, right? We're very intentional about who we assign people to, and making sure you're aligned with a coach that is going to work well with you. And then we have those layers of, you can talk to specialists and you can talk to someone who specializes more in the exercise or movement piece, and there's just so much more value there than if you were just to talk to one person. Yeah.
So where I want to go from here is this idea of, and I think we've really made this pretty prominent from the start, Mandy, with this sort of more chat type podcast, has been the inclusion of enjoyment in
Mm.
the progression / longevity of your results. And the reason I want to go down this path is more that I had a really good win with one of my private clients on Thursday last week. And he said, dude, I've been weight training on and off, and like really on and off. It would be 6 months on and then 2 years off and then repeat. Has been the case that they haven't enjoyed exercise. They've gone in there and said they had to do it. They've hired PTs to make sure they have to turn up. Like all of these things where it becomes another obligation in a day full of obligations. And this is where I think we've found a really nice, as we talked about before, critical threshold of exercise understanding, because we do actually talk about exercise a lot in regards to how to move, what to focus on, really diving a little bit more into the mechanics. And most people from the outside go, oh golly, there's a lot here in regards to, I just need to lift a dumbbell up and down. But if all you do is lift a dumbbell up and down, it's really boring, right? And you don't know what's happening and you wonder why you don't enjoy weight training, is because you're lifting a dumbbell up and down. Whereas taking that, extra 15 minutes to understand tempo, understand what muscle is actually working, to actually feel in tune with, that's how you feel your back, not just lift a dumbbell to your chest, has taken so many clients over the years. And this has been something that I invested in really early on and really has been a strong foundation behind my personal training and coaching for the last decade, has been, I want you to understand exercise. Most people have a busy day, and then when they exercise, they want to block it out. Whereas I'm really, really strong on making sure that when you exercise, you lean in, right? You really take that time to pay attention to what muscles you feel. And if you do that, you get so much more out of the exercise itself. You feel more in tune. It just feels more intuitive. And I think nutritionally, Mandy, that's obviously being a big focus with you with the conscious nutrition brand, right? Like being conscious around it and being able to look at that through every area of, I ate a food and I got real gassy afterwards, or I felt bloated. That tells me something. So there's this more collaborative type nature that I think is a really nice way to look at the auditing of information, yet the improvement in action is not actually that you technically do more stuff, but you are definitely listening to more and then selectively choosing your next action, which sounds kind of big picture, but that was a really, really big win for my client and really big win for me, because it was like, okay, if this person enjoys this thing, it means that there's a level of competency now coming with it, a level of enjoyment, and they're going to do it for a really long time, regardless of whether we continue to work together. And that's valuable. So I think it's a really big piece behind the, if I just said, do this, don't ask questions, that's a really, really a big part of, I guess, what we stand against in regards to, I need you to know enough to make sure that you can do this on yourself when you're traveling, etc. as well.
Yeah. I have one phrase, I guess, that summarizes all of that, which is, and I say this to people all the time: stay curious. Yeah, it's not about yourself and about how you're responding to the thing you're doing. I think we're almost in a way raised to be a little bit disconnected from our own response to certain things. We eat food and we don't pay attention to how we felt after it, particularly, or we, do some exercise and don't pay attention to which muscles we were actually engaging to do that exercise, or we go on holiday and don't even notice how much of our routine we threw out the door, and then we wonder why we feel a bit tired and a bit ragged at the end of it. So I talk to clients about this all the time. Like, whenever anything's coming up, they'll say, something happened or they went off track or they did this or whatever. I'm like, how did it make you feel? What happened? What could you change? What will you do different next time? And it's that whole kind of retraining ourselves to be curious with the feedback that our own body is giving us, so that we can then change it and do it better next time. And that's the growth piece, and that becomes so much more fulfilling and so much more fun, because you're actually like, oh, that I did this and this happened, what if I do something different next time? And you start kind of guinea pigging yourself in a way, and it becomes interesting. You want to stay doing it because you want to keep seeing what happens. Whereas if we're just told, do this, forget about how you feel, that's incredibly boring. No one's going to want to continue doing it.
Yeah. So, if you're listening to this podcast, I think you're in a spot where you probably enjoy learning more stuff and you're probably a little bit more engaged than the regular human. And I must say, our best clients are the ones that have listened to the podcast. I think I've probably mentioned that before, but it's very much, we see a huge ripple effect of how much impact people have, I guess, from listening to the podcast. But it's been really, really cool to see that show up in the types of clients that come through, knowing that they've got that background of context and knowledge to really just dive straight into the implementation aspect, right? And if you're not getting the results that you want to, I do want to put a little bit of an invite in there. Like if that's something that you've been listening to our stuff for a couple of weeks or a couple of years now, yet you haven't managed to get that granularity of really getting the results you're after or the implementation you're after, it's probably not more information. And I'd love for you to talk to our team directly, even if you don't join one of our main programs, just talking to our team, asking some questions, getting an idea of what tweaks and adjustments you can make. And kind of like we talked about before, what are you not seeing that could make it so much easier than it is currently? So if you haven't gone onto our website, gone to Body Reset and booked in a time with our team, I just want to put a little link below for you to do so. It's a completely free call. You can talk to one of our top experts. The only people that you get on the call have been with us for years. They've got understanding on exactly how things work. And they'll be able to provide you with some really, really clear steps on making sure either the program is a good fit or that the steps that you are focusing on are the right moves. Because the biggest thing that we can save you is just years of trial and error, years of focusing on the wrong stuff or running the wrong way. So if you haven't had a call with our team, that's your call to action to do so. I'll drop a link below and make sure to actually go through the program. Before we finish up, Mandy, one last thing I want to look at is really circling back to, I guess, okay, we've talked about group. We understand it's important, but what do we actually talk about in group that makes it more special? If we're not just talking about brain health for the hour, what's the other stuff that we're actually adding in there that adds the nitty gritty? And I think the overall concept that I've really kept front of mind with our group calls is if someone wants to be a world-class soccer player, right, they can hire a one-on-one coach and focus on the drills and the things here and there to get better at kicking and dribbling and all the things that people do in soccer that I'm not aware of. Yet until you get them into a team of other professional soccer players or people that are aspiring professionals, do you not create that momentum, that mindset, that sort of growth mentality of there's areas that I suck at right now and I could get better because these other people are improving around me, right? It's really intangible. But most people understand that if I want to be the best in the world, uh, and you don't need to be the best in the world, obviously, to go through our program, but you do want to be in a spot with that. There's an ambition to be better than you are currently, right? Whether that's stripping off a couple of kilos, just getting rid of the frustration of not knowing what to focus on, and getting stronger and really looking after yourself the next 20, 30 years. I think most people understand that, right? With a soccer analogy in regards to improving your results overall, but your overall just energy, right? And I've been in plenty of communities over the year. You've had some insight in some of those top ones as well, and you've just seen that general energy of a room that you get off and you kind of feel like you're running through walls, right? It's not necessarily the information itself. There's a reminder in there that you're focusing on the right stuff or ignore the stuff that you were kind of spending too much time on, but that overall energy is something else. What is that, or what's your takeaways from that, Mandy?
I think there's a couple of components to the group stuff. There's one, and we see this all the time with our mastery, our once a month mastery call, and we always have a client spotlight where one of our clients who's doing awesome stuff gets to share a little bit of their journey. And the feedback from that always is motivation or inspiration. And motivation for people, I think, or encouragement might be a better word there, for people who feel like they're doing something and they're struggling at it alone, and realizing that actually someone else is struggling with this too, and they've worked out a way to succeed at it, and now I've got an idea of how I could approach it differently. So there's that, which you don't get if you're by yourself. If you're in your own little world and you're just kind of struggling with an issue, you're not getting that outside help or outside kind of ideas. And the human mind doesn't think up ideas in a vacuum. We get ideas that we build on from what we see other people doing. The other part is just the motivation or inspiration piece to do a little bit more. And I feel this all the time. Like every time you get on a call and someone's doing some awesome stuff, and you're like, well, I could actually up my game a little bit here. I'm not really doing as much as I could, and I think that's a really cool part. But the other group component, which I think is really powerful, that we've really built more into our calls, right, is um, talking with clients and problem solving in a group setting, brainstorming in a group setting, and realizing that someone probably has an idea or a way to deal with something that someone else is struggling with. So why not get everyone talking and sharing and brainstorm ideas together? And I think that's just a really powerful part of the group discussions as well, which we've built on and is key.
Yeah, it's been a huge part of the development of our program that I guess we haven't highlighted, right? Which is, I guess, the big reason our program's got better over the last couple of years is it hasn't just been the limit of Mandy and Ollie's brain power. It's been now expanding that into the people in our world. And one of the phrases we say all the time, right, is no one's as smart as everyone. And it's a really nice way to really allow that brainstorming type session to bring ideas to the surface that were completely not there before. And I think a lot of the phrases we use, a lot of the ways that we tackle certain problems have actually come directly from members that have gone through that approach, right? And you put a couple hundred people in a place that are problem solving, you learn stuff much quicker, right? And it just becomes this incubator to, I've got this problem to solve, I've got 300 brains to solve it. It's going to be much easier than one. So
Mm.
that's come up a ton of times, and there's been a lot of things, even in my own routines or lifestyle, has been changed through showing up to those calls, right? So it's a real the ability to plug in and have that reshuffle of both priority and increase in standards is something that just changes how you look at the world, right? It goes from you walking around with shades on in the middle of the night to actually being able to put spectacles on and actually see everything better. It's
Mhm.
simply what you're focusing on because you're able to sift through the crap and actually look at what's relevant, right? I think without our world, and I'm someone who keeps saying this, is I'm really grateful to be a part of our world simply even as the host of that world, right? Like I get more energy out of it. And if I was simply stuck in an environment where the only thing I saw was the problems in my workplace, the news on the TV, the crap that's put out on social media, I would constantly be stuck in the middle of all this noise rather than being able to know what's truly important, relevant, and my biggest priority. And I think that ability to just simply plug in, probably in the same way that you choose to continue, hopefully, to this podcast, right, is your ability to plug in, listen to those main points. And if that's the complete max of your capacity right now, like, well done, keep showing up, keep plugging in, and allow that to be a space where you're just feeding off a bit of our energy on these calls to make sure you're moving in the right direction. But obviously in our world, that's being something that to give you an insight and to shine the curtain behind, I guess, a huge revelation of ours inside how we build programs. There's plenty of information that we can add in there, but refine that down and allow the energy slash the removal of the sunglasses in the middle of the night to be brought to the surface. I think that's where people start to really tackle through problems that they haven't before.
Mhm. Yeah, it's utilizing the power of the group to accelerate your progress, right? You don't have to reinvent the wheel every time. You can actually learn from what other people are doing and get ahead or get whatever you want that much faster by being part of something that's already moving in that direction.
Yeah. So yeah, I just wanted to add that one in because I think it's one of these things that it's so hard to kind of put on paper as this is why group is helpful. And that if you're just doing one-on-one, I think you're leaving a lot on the table. You're just making it much harder than it needs to be. And having that contribution or that balance of both has been really, really helpful. I'm pretty indifferent to whether we did entirely group or entirely one-on-one. We simply leaned that way because we saw we got better results, right? And if you're a client listening to this, which obviously we have many of our clients and members listening to this podcast directly, make sure you're continuing to lean in, right? Because it is very much one of these spaces that you get out what you put in. It's if you don't log on, you don't get access to it. And I think just being able to create that rhythm, create that routine of just being able to plug in, check in on your brain health or your general mental and physical health through your ability to audit the ways that you're tracking problems or the lens to which you're looking through, I think it makes a really big difference, and hence why we do the podcast where we do. So, Guys, if there's anything here that is a real takeaway for you over the last couple of episodes, please shoot us a message on Instagram or email, whatever's easiest for you, to let us know what has been the biggest highlight from these style of podcasts or anything else that we've put out in the last couple of months that you've listened to. It makes a huge difference to what we will continue to do moving forward. So if there's a topic you'd love for us to revisit or look into that you haven't seen or go deeper on, just send us a message. I'd love to know what's been taken away. And again, if this was insightful in regards to you being interested enough to know more about the program and what that could look like for you, again, I will drop that link below so you can book in for a call with our team and we can walk you through what it looks like and what next steps would look like for you as well. So, otherwise, hope you have an amazing week and we will talk to you next time.